Mark, how are your findings treated in the overall dissolution of a marriage?
Depends upon who hires us. Sometimes the bottom line is that we are often asked to prepare a report that identifies what documents we looked at, what our observations were, and what our conclusions are. And sometimes our conclusions are, things look pretty reasonable, and we see no severe modifications that need to be made to the representation of the assets, liability, and lifestyle. Sometimes we conclude that the lifestyles depicted in the net worth statements or the financial affidavit and the tax returns are grossly understated, that there are items that are in fact being paid from other sources that are indicative of the lifestyle of the family, and so there's an adjustment to what's being represented has to be made. It all depends upon, it's on a case-by-case basis, and depends upon, quite honestly, the size of the marital estate, the amount of money that the parties want to invest in this exercise. Sometimes our findings are reported to the court in a form of a report in which we may be required to testify at some point in time if the divorce proceeds into an actual court battle. Sometimes our report is used as a tool by the attorney as to their efforts to identify additional items from the other side. So it really depends upon the nature of the case. It depends upon the size of the case. Sometimes it depends upon the style of the attorney that we're working with. There are a number of different variances.
Mark, do you have an opinion as to what stage during the divorce process the litigant should consider this exercise?
Well, most of the time we're hired right from the start. And that's because in most instances in the jurisdictions that we practice in, which is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, there are certain financial concerns that have to be addressed right from the start, like temporary or pendente lite support, or child support, or maintaining the lifestyle of the parties while the divorce process is maturing. And so the earlier that we're involved, the clearer we can present these findings, even if they're preliminary, so that these interim financial arrangements can be made and can be reasonable. It's not the intention of the court in a divorce proceeding for one party to live the high life and one party to live in the street. And very often when there's a circumstance, a situation in which there is a tremendous discrepancy between income from the husband and wife or access to finances between the husband and wife, and there are children involved and maybe even multiple homes, it's not the intention that there should be an economic suffering during the divorce process. And so often the lawyers look to us even to do something, preliminary, just to help them articulate to the court what's going on, what the financial concerns are.
Okay. Mark, how do you present those findings to the attorneys then? I mean, is there a type of report or analysis is there a typical form?
As I said before, it could either be in a report, it could be verbal. It depends upon how the lawyer wants to handle the findings. Sometimes we prepare a report on our stationery. Sometimes we prepare a report in the form of an expert affidavit. Sometimes we just give them an outline. It really depends upon what the lawyer wants and how the lawyer is going to use this information. Generally, if the lawyer is going to use this information as an appendage to his or her legal papers, our work is more formal. If that's not the case, then we don't have to be, so we can have a more of an informal um, um, report. It really depends upon the situation.
Kathy, did we lose you there? Hold on, Mark. I beg your pardon. It looks like Kathy had some technical problems. Kathy, are you back on?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yeah, now we can hear you. I'm sorry. We
I
lost you there for
apologize.
a moment.
My call just dropped off, which happens normally every day, so I apologize, Mark, and to the listeners. Well, I have one final question, Mark. This whole exercise, does it add to or further cloud all of the issues surrounding a divorce proceeding?
Well, you're asking me that question, and the obvious answer is, because I'm doing this, that we're trying to make things clearer. You know, the divorce process by nature is often a murky and cloudy exercise. You know, I often when I lecture and we to the legal community, and you know, I often say, you know, those of us in the matrimonial arena, both from the legal and the accounting side, we have something in common. We rarely see people at their best and often see people at their worst. And so the purpose of our involvement is to try to clarify the financial components of the marriage and the financial requirements in a divorce conclusion, a divorce, or it would be a settlement, or it be a court order. And so, you know, our job is to make things crystal clear when we can. Sometimes we don't have all the information to make it crystal clear. Sometimes we have to make assumptions and form conclusions based upon the best available information that's provided. But I say this to everyone that I speak with. I'm in the financial literacy business. My job is to extract the financial information in a certain situation, in this instance a divorce, to try to analyze it and make conclusions that stand on its own 2 feet. And hopefully, if there was someone with the same level of experience and credentials and expertise as myself, they would come to the same or similar conclusion. And that's our job.
Well, it seems this process it should be seen as a comfort for parties to a divorce proceeding, or at least one side anyway, Mark. That's actually all the questions I have. Lisa, do you have any questions for Mark?
I do, Mark. I guess we can probably assume that in situations where you've been asked to do a forensic review or a review of the accounting of the assets of the couple, that one can assume that the assets are fairly significant, or you wouldn't be asked to be involved. And along with that, I would imagine that there are occasions when there are some overseas accounts that have to be identified and traced. How do you go about finding them and identifying the existence of those overseas accounts?
Well, I'd like to encourage them to send me to overseas to go look for them, but that cost
we'll come with you.
Yeah, right. But that cost may be too much of a burden. You know, it really depends upon the situation. If there are large sums of monies overseas, there are really only 2 ways that the money can get there. Or I shouldn't say only. There are 2 main ways in which we see the money gets there. The first one is that money is transferred from known bank accounts to those overseas accounts. And so when we, in fact, are given the information to analyze bank statements, we often look to identify transactions such as electronic transfers or large disbursements or large debits from the account and find out where the money goes. We call that a tracing analysis. So if $100,000 was in the account today, and then $100,000 is transferred to someplace else, and it says on the bank statement, wire transfer, we will try to determine where it was wired to. Okay, the bank statement should have information. The other thing that we often find, if someone has a sophisticated business, particularly a business that has an international reach, sometimes there is actually income that's generated abroad that stays abroad. And so depending upon the facts and circumstances, we may or may not be able to identify if that is a valid step for us to analyze. So those are the two things that we commonly see. You know, if someone owns a candy store, it's very, very hard to take, you know, rolls of quarters in your pockets and walk across the border with money in your pocket. It's just not something that can be easily done. A wire transfer can be easily done. A business that generates income abroad and keeps the money abroad can, in fact, you know, be facilitated by the business owner if he or she tries to do that. So, you know, that's really what we do. You know, there's a misconception that people, you know, walk across the border with $100,000 in cash in their pocket, you know, on a regular basis. We don't see that.
So it's sort of back to the old saying, you know, follow the money, and you can do a pretty good job of following the money and identifying its origin.
That's correct.
Thanks, Mark. Those are all the questions I have. Kathy?
Great question, Lisa. Mark, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with our listeners. For any of you who would like to get in touch with Mark directly, he can be reached at msgcpa@msgcpa.com. The website is www.msgcpa.com, and the MSG blog is www.forensicperspectives.com. On behalf of our guest, Mark Gottlieb of MSG CPA, and my co-host, Lisa DeMonte, this is Kathy DiLorenzo from mylegal.com, signing off from Pittsburgh on Wednesday, September 1, 2010. Don't forget you can listen to a podcast of today's show or any of our previous podcasts by going to our homepage, www.mylegal.com, and scrolling down to the Blog Talk Radio player. Mark, thanks again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. Bye-bye.